Mass vaccinations, immigration orders, and steps to tackle climate change. The Biden administration moves quickly, taking actions with an impact in Texas.
The first 100 days is like your first drive of a football game. You want to set a tone for what's to come.
How orders from the new administration are affecting the state, and how some Texans are pushing back.
Are you concerned by those findings?
Yeah, of course I'm concerned. It's no question in anybody's mind that it is broken.
Following our investigation, Texas lawmakers are promising to address discrepancies with a racial profiling law and the state agency tasked with police oversight. A failure to report coming up. Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle, and today we're joining you once again from the state capitol. The grounds and the building reopened on Thursday after being closed for several days. The state has since stepped up security in the Capitol complex. It was a precaution amid concerns about violent protests in response to the inauguration of President Joe Biden. There were no violent incidents. The focus shifts now from protests to the Biden administration's agenda and what that means for Texas. Politics reporter John Engel lays out what to expect in the first 100 days.
The first 100 days is like your first drive of a football game. You want to set a tone for what's to come.
100 million COVID-19 vaccine doses in 100 days. It's part of the first drive for President Joe Biden. With an executive order, the federal government will reimburse states that use the National Guard. States have so far been in control of the rollout, and Texas only recently adopted a hub model for mass vaccinations.
This goal of 100 million immunized in 100 days can be done. We just need to put all our effort into that.
More than 43,000 Texans filed new applications for unemployment benefits after the new year. Biden is calling on Congress to approve a stimulus package of $1.9 trillion as his first legislative effort.
If you can't do that in the first 100 days, it's always harder to do later because you run out of political capital pretty fast.
Biden also promises to protect undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. illegally as children. 124,000 of those DACA recipients live here in Texas. With a presidential memorandum, Biden asks Congress to create a pathway to citizenship.
But we need a fix. We can't just stay in DACA itself.
On the environment, Biden wants to transition away from fossil fuels and re-enter the U.S. in the Paris Climate Agreement while ending subsidies for oil and gas companies. On day one, he canceled the permit for the Keystone XL oil pipeline, which connects Houston to Alberta, Canada.
Politically, to say that there are going to be big changes makes people nervous in Texas. That creates uncertainty and confusion and probably is not going to be politically great for Democrats in Texas.
For State of Texas, I'm John Engel.
Texas Republicans are already working to fight Biden administration policies. Congressman Chip Roy opposes the U.S. rejoining the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement. Roy said the moves would reverse two great accomplishments of the Trump administration. He plans to introduce legislation to prevent tax funding to the international efforts. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is vowing to push back on federal mandates supported by Biden. The Texas Public Policy Foundation says it has a number of federal lawsuits ready to go centered on federal overreach. Currently at the top of the foundation's list, a federal takeover of education curriculum and energy regulations. The agency says those regulations threaten energy independence and thousands of jobs in Texas.
You have the intent to, for example, rejoin the Paris Accords. There are a few different tools that may result in the reduction of production from Texas's thriving oil and gas industry.
The American Civil Liberties Union says it's already preparing to see Paxton in court on many of these issues. President Biden also signed a series of executive orders focused on immigration reform, and he sent legislation to Congress that would provide a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Texas Senator John Cornyn called that a symbolic gesture that will have a difficult time winning passage.
If he were actually interested in getting something done, there would have been a conversation rather than just dropping this legislation without any consultation or discussion or even hearings in the Congress. Having said that, I'm certainly open to try to do to make progress on a step-by-step basis. I would start with the DACA recipients who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in a real bind. We need to provide these young people some certainty and predictability in their future. I'm more than happy to do that. It won't be universally popular, but I think it's the right thing to do. And that's the approach I would suggest.
President Biden also signed an executive order to stop spending money to build the border wall. Back here at the Capitol on Thursday, Governor Greg Abbott held a roundtable discussion with law enforcement agencies from across the state to outline his public safety priorities. But civil rights advocates are saying the governor's list is tone deaf after the racial tension and unrest that spread across the country last year. Maggie Glenn explains more.
The fact is that Texas has a broken bail system.
Governor Abbott lists bail reform as one of his top public safety priorities this session. The legislation will be named after a Texas trooper who was killed in the line of duty in 2017.
The Texas Department of Public Safety trooper Damon Allen was shot and killed during a traffic stop. His accused killer was out on bail when he should have been behind bars.
It aims to increase communication in the courts by ensuring judges have the full criminal history of a defendant before setting bail. But civil rights advocates say bail reform in Texas needs to go even further.
What we need is for judges to make meaningful, individualized determinations about someone's risk. I mean, bail should be based on someone's risk. And not the amount of money in their bank account.
The cash bail system is completely flawed. It's very discriminatory.
They say the governor's roundtable failed to include important perspectives.
He could have invited activists and organizers who have been begging for police accountability at the table.
And they're disappointed the governor's priorities didn't include police reform.
The top of the list for lawmakers this session should be passing the George Floyd Act. It will do things like ensure that we can hold bad officers accountable in state court. It'll ensure that we can reduce arrests for things that are really petty.
Maggie Glenn for State of Texas.
Governor Abbott also renewed his call for the state to punish cities that pull funding and resources from police departments. He focused on the city of Austin's plan to gradually shift money away from the police department and toward other public safety reforms. The governor has said he would support legislation to freeze property tax rates and remove annexation powers from cities that cut funds for law enforcement.
Please don't sue me, officer! Please don't sue me! I'm black! Please don't sue me! Please! Please! Please!
Traffic stops like this and a Discovery police agency statewide aren't following a racial profiling law prompt our investigation and a promise for change from state leaders. Racial profiling, a failure to report, coming up.